I've decided to start a new life without you." The words didn't explode. They landed, heavy, calculated, like a glass dropped on marble, too sharp to stop, too loud to pretend nothing shattered. We were seated in a private banquet room at Augusta's oldest fine dining restaurant, surrounded by family, colleagues, and friends who'd flown in to celebrate our daughter's graduation. The pianist was halfway through What a Wonderful World, napkins still folded, champagne just poured. And then Gregory stood. My husband of 28 years raised his glass and made an announcement. Not for Amelia, our daughter, not to honor her achievements, but to announce his exit from our marriage. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, especially in front of a room full of people who applauded when your life looked whole, then stay. This story is for you. Subscribe to Revenge with Seren, where we don't scream. We remember, we prepare, and we rise. Gregory didn't stammer, didn't blink. He spoke like it was weather, casual, icy. "I've decided to start a new life without you." To my left, Amelia's champagne flute quivered in her hand. Her graduation cap was still perched on those dark curls, her smile still fading in real time. On my right, Gregory's mother sat stiff, eyes wide. Somewhere near the end of the table, someone gasped. Knives and forks stopped midair like the room had frozen solid. I didn't look at Gregory. I didn't ask why, and I certainly didn't give him what he came for. Across the room, behind a tall floral arrangement, I saw her. Cassandra Wells, blonde, manicured, 17 years younger, sitting with 3 women who used to be my friends. She had eaten off my plates, laughed on my back porch, brought cheese to our 4th of July cookout, and now she was here, watching, measuring the moment. She thought she was winning. But I didn't cry, didn't crumble, didn't plead. Instead, I reached into my handbag, pulled out a cream-colored envelope, and placed it next to Gregory's plate. He blinked. "What's this?" "Something for you to read later," I said softly. His fingers hovered over the envelope like it might burn him. I turned to Amelia, her eyes wide, her lips parted, frozen. I reached for her hand, leaned close. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. No matter what happens here, this day still belongs to you." She didn't respond. She just blinked. But she didn't pull her hand away. I stood, smoothed the front of my slate blue dress, took one breath, then faced the room. "Please," I said to the guests, "enjoy your lunch. It's a beautiful day to celebrate Amelia." And then I walked out. Not fast, not flustered, just deliberate. The restaurant door groaned slightly as I opened it, then thudded shut behind me. Outside, the Georgia air hit me, thick with jasmine and late spring heat, but it felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in years. Each step down Reynolds Street felt lighter than the last, like someone had loosened the corset I'd been wearing for decades, one I hadn't realized was choking me. I was 3 blocks away when I heard the door behind me slam open. "Bianca!" Gregory's voice, sharper now. "Bianca, what the hell is this?" I didn't stop, didn't look back. Instead, I let the smallest smile flicker across my lips, because he didn't sound like a man in control. He sounded like a man who'd lost something. That envelope? It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a cry for answers. It was the beginning. 6 months earlier, I'd noticed, not by accident, by instinct. Gregory had grown distant, his routines too perfect, his affection too rehearsed, and I had been managing our household finances for over 2 decades. The moment I saw the first strange transfer, $900 marked consulting, I knew. I didn't accuse, I investigated. He didn't think I'd look, because he thought I was safe, passive, predictable. He thought wrong. So I let him plan his dramatic exit, his big reveal, and I prepared mine. If you've ever had your life cracked open in public, only to realize you'd already swept up the glass before anyone else even noticed the mess, if it were you, standing in that room, would you have said something? Or walked out like I did without a single tear? Leave a comment below. Sometimes survival begins the moment you say nothing at all. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the magnolia trees were casting long shadows across the lawn like ribbons unraveling. The hydrangeas I planted last spring were blooming, too full, too bright for a day like this. The house looked unchanged, but I was not the same woman who had walked out of that restaurant. Inside, the air was still, not peaceful, sterile. The kind of silence that settles after years of growing numb to someone else's noise. No Gregory asking where his cufflinks were, no sighs over my coffee being too weak, just the faint echo of my own footsteps, steady and deliberate. I set my keys down on the marble entry table and walked to the kitchen. The envelope I had left beside his plate wasn't just a legal formality, it was the end of his version of the story, and the beginning of mine. It held 6 months' worth of documentation. Every withdrawal, every gift, every lie, itemized. He thought he was orchestrating the moment, but I had already rewritten the script. If you've ever had to prepare quietly while someone else performed loudly, subscribe to Revenge with Seren, because some of us don't raise our voices, we raise our standards. It began just after Christmas. The tree was still up. Amelia had just returned to Charleston for her final semester. I was going through our finances, something I'd done for over 2 decades, when I spotted a $2,500 transfer labeled consulting. We had no consultant. I paused, looked again, then deeper. Within an hour, I had found 4 more. Small amounts, spread across statements, enough to look like background noise, unless you knew what to listen for. I didn't accuse, I observed, I printed statements, set alerts. And the next morning, I called the bank. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Can you walk me through the last 3 months of withdrawals? I just noticed a charge I don't remember authorizing." That's all it took to start seeing the full picture. There were dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, jewelry from a boutique in Savannah, a wire sent to a rental agency, an installment for a beachfront condo. Then came the message. It was a Saturday morning in March. Gregory left his phone on the counter to mow the lawn. The screen lit up. "Cassandra, only a few more months until we're free. I can't wait to wake up next to you every day." His reply, "After graduation, a public setting is better. She won't make a scene." He chose spectacle, thinking it would break me before I could stand. But I wasn't waiting for his ending. I had already filed the paperwork. The following Monday, I called Philip Anderson, the lawyer who had drafted our prenup back in 1996, when Gregory was the one afraid of losing everything. Philip read through the document, then looked at me carefully. "If you can prove infidelity," he said, "the standard 50-50 doesn't apply. You'd be entitled to more." So I gathered proof, not gossip, not suspicions, hard facts, hotel bookings, bank transfers, gift receipts, screenshots. I didn't tell Amelia. I wouldn't let his failures stain her last semester. She deserved to feel proud, not responsible. So I waited. I smiled through holidays. I signed cards. I played my role. While in the background, I prepared. The documents I placed beside Gregory's plate had been filed that morning. The timestamp was deliberate. 10:03 a.m., just 2 hours before his speech. He thought he was in control. He forgot who handled the numbers. He forgot the clause he made me sign. And most of all, he forgot that I stopped asking for permission years ago. I was at the sink, rinsing a glass, when the door slammed behind me. "Bianca!" Gregory's voice came hard and fast. "What the hell was that?" I dried my hands, turned to face him. "You served me divorce papers? At our daughter's graduation?" "You wanted a clean break," I said calmly. "I just filed the paperwork." "You had no right." "I had every right." His face twisted, not in fury, but disbelief. He wasn't prepared for this version of me, the one who didn't ask or cry or chase, the one who didn't wait for his permission to leave. He wasn't angry because I ruined his plan. He was angry because I beat him to it. Gregory stood in the kitchen, still gripping the crumpled envelope like it might disappear if he just held it tight enough. His jaw worked as though there were words inside that refused to surface. I said nothing. I waited. "You've been planning this?" he finally asked, his voice sharp, disbelieving. I tilted my head. 6 months. He blinked. stunned. You started with small withdrawals, $900 here, $1,250 there, I continued, walking past him toward the sink to pour a glass of water. From the joint account, you labeled them consulting fees, but there were no consultants, only Cassandra. He exhaled hard, rubbed the back of his neck, started pacing. Bianca, Save it. My voice was steady. You don't get to rewrite this. For 28 years, I had allowed him to lead in public while I cleaned up behind him in private. I adjusted when his startups failed. I tightened our budget when he said he was rebuilding. I waded through his detachment, smiled when I felt invisible. I was the scaffolding that held up his image, and now he was surprised to find out I had built a structure of my own underneath it. He leaned against the counter, bracing himself with both hands. This doesn't have to get ugly. That was your choice, and you made it. In front of Amelia. In front of 50 people who were there to celebrate her, not your escape. He looked down. I didn't want it to go like that. But it did. He followed as I walked toward the study. You had this all planned. What else have you done? I didn't answer. Not yet. I opened the drawer labeled Caldwell, preliminary, and retrieved a folder. Then I handed it to him. Inside were documents from my attorney, a motion to freeze the joint accounts, an affidavit of his financial misconduct, a complete timeline of the transfers, a list of purchases traced to Cassandra. You moved money from our retirement fund. You paid for jewelry and dinners out of our shared account. You leased an apartment in both your names, without informing your legal spouse. His lips parted. You went through my email? No, I said. I went through the bank. The emails just confirmed what I already knew. He flipped pages. His expression darkened. This won't hold up. The prenup. Section 12, I said, calm and clear. Infidelity clause. Still active. Still enforceable. That's not possible. You had 28 years to read it. He sat down on the edge of the couch we picked out after his third pivot. He looked around the room like he didn't recognize it. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he'd never seen the life I was building while he rehearsed his next act. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. But it did. He looked up. What about Amelia? I froze at the bottom of the stairs. That name still hit me in the ribs. You mean the daughter you betrayed publicly? The one you hugged that morning while planning your exit? He flinched. I'll talk to her, I said, but don't you dare use her as a shield. I walked to the coat closet and reached for the bag I had packed the night before, just in case. He straightened. Where are you going? To Diana's. You went to my sister? She came to me, Gregory, last Christmas. I paused. I didn't believe her, not then, but I started watching. His face paled. She saw you with Cassandra in Savannah. She gave you a chance to stop. You didn't. I turned to leave. His voice dropped to something softer, almost pleading. You know this isn't who I really am. I stopped, then met his eyes. Exactly. This is who you are. And now everyone sees it. I stepped outside. The sky was dimming, the first stars starting to show. Diana's car was waiting at the curb. I got in, quiet, unshaken, and I didn't look back. Gregory didn't come home that night. Maybe he thought showing up at Diana's door, with Cassandra in tow, would force a conversation. Instead, Diana shut the door in his face. By morning, he was texting, twice, then a third time. We need to talk. I need to explain. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because math doesn't listen to apologies. For every soft excuse, there was a hard number. For every memory, a receipt. Instead, I poured coffee into the ceramic mug Amelia had given me last Christmas, the one that read, "Strong women raised me." I stood on Diana's back patio, watching the wind shift through the wisteria vines. I let the silence settle over me. It no longer frightened me. Diana returned from her early morning class at 9:03. She was still wearing her university lanyard and carrying a box of graded essays. He's probably tearing the house apart by now, she said, setting her things down. He packed to leave. I just moved up the timeline. She gave a low whistle. And the accounts? Frozen by 4:45 p.m. yesterday, emergency motion signed by the judge. I slid the folder toward her on the patio table, the court order, the asset freeze, the financial breakdown. Gregory's personal account was still intact, but restricted. The Savannah condo? Frozen. The reversed wire? Already flagged. He thought betrayal would cost me trust. It cost him time. And in court, time is leverage. At 10:12, my phone buzzed. Amelia. Mom, where are you? I need to see you. I called her immediately. I'm with Aunt Diana. Are you okay? I am now. Are you? She paused. Can I come? Yes, right now. She arrived less than an hour later, still in the same soft blue dress from the day before, but with sneakers instead of heels. Her cap was gone, but not the ache in her expression. We sat in the sunroom. Diana brought tea, and I told her everything, not in a rush, not as a blow, just slowly, logically, like I'd been preparing for this moment too. The missing funds, the condo payment, the jewelry, the timeline, the clause, the signature. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. Her breathing changed, but she didn't interrupt. Only when I handed her the folder did her eyes fill. You knew for months? She whispered. I didn't want to ruin your final semester. You earned that joy. You earned that pride. Her chin quivered. He hugged me that morning, told me he was proud, and then... I know. I'm so angry, but part of me still doesn't want to lose him. You don't have to choose today, I said. Your relationship with him is yours. I'm not here to control it. I just wanted you to have truth, not confusion. She reached for my hand. You gave me that. Quietly. And completely. We sat like that for a moment. Mother and daughter, not in grief, but in recognition. Sometimes daughters don't meet their mothers until the crisis introduces them properly. Then came the knock. Diana peeked through the window, raised her brow. It's him. I sighed. Let him in. Gregory entered like he was still the host of something, that same careful posture. But it faltered the second he saw Amelia. You're here, he said. She didn't move. Where else would I be? He turned to me. We need to talk. I think everything's already in writing. This is between us, Bianca, not the whole family. Diana stepped forward. You made it public the second you stood up in that restaurant and turned my niece's graduation into a press conference. Gregory flinched. I'm not here to fight, he said. I want to fix this. You don't fix what you plan to break, I replied. I made a mistake. Number A mistake is forgetting a birthday. You orchestrated an affair, funded it, lied about it, hid it in financial documents. That's not a mistake. That's a plan. He turned to Amelia. Sweetheart, please. She didn't let him finish. Don't call me that. Not right now. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, she said, and you meant every step that got you there. He looked back at me, but I had nothing left to give him. You chose this, I said. Now you live with it. He turned to leave, then paused. Where do I even go? I didn't answer, because I didn't care. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Not physically, it was early June, and the Georgia heat stuck to your clothes like static. But inside, in that marble corridor, everything felt still, sterile. Cassandra arrived with red lipstick and a silk scarf, like she was auditioning for a different role entirely. Gregory walked 3 paces behind her, not beside her, not in front, behind. I didn't flinch. Diana and Amelia sat behind me, quiet. Neither of them had asked to attend. I hadn't invited them, but they came anyway. The clerk called our case. The judge was sharp-eyed and even sharper-voiced, and when she opened the file, the weight of my preparation filled the room. 3 folders, 17 exhibits, 8 screenshots, a printed copy of the prenup signed in 1996 with his initials on every page. Gregory's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up the clause. Infidelity resulting in demonstrable financial harm nullifies equal division of shared assets. Plaintiff retains right to reclaim full value of misused funds with interest. She read it twice, slowly, then looked at Gregory. I assume you recall this language? He nodded. His lawyer whispered something in a tone that sounded more like a warning than advice. I didn't look at Cassandra. I didn't need to. I could feel her shrinking behind the performance. The judge turned to me. Do you have a restitution amount in mind? Yes, Your Honor, $147,900, tracked across 14 months. And documentation? Itemized, Exhibit B through G. It was the calmest I'd felt in months, because it wasn't revenge, it was restoration. I didn't yell, I didn't shake, I didn't even glance at Gregory, because none of this was about making him look bad, it was about making me whole. The judge reviewed the documents, then looked directly at him. You'll respond to this claim in writing within 15 days. If no objection is filed, I will consider it uncontested and rule accordingly. The hearing was over in 19 minutes. Outside, Gregory followed me to the parking garage. Bianca, wait. I paused, just enough to acknowledge him. That number, he said. Is it really worth all this? It's what you paid to walk away before you said a word. It's not about the number. It's about the math behind it. She meant nothing to me. I turned, fully this time. You didn't fund nothing for over a year. You didn't plan vacations with nothing. You didn't risk a 30-year marriage over nothing. She was a mistake. Number, she was your choice. Over and over again. He looked tired. Not sad. Just worn out by the fallout of a fire he'd set himself. You were never the villain, he said, but you've become cold. Cold is what a person becomes when they're expected to warm others while freezing on the inside. He blinked, like he hadn't expected that. I didn't wait for more. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, breathed. When I got home, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a blueprint. Not of a house, of a business. 10 years ago, I'd sketched it on the back of a notepad after a financial planning seminar. Women in Transition, a financial consultancy for women after divorce, widowhood, or inheritance shifts. Gregory had laughed when he saw it. That's noble, but not really scalable. Now I saw it differently. It wasn't about scale. It was about rebuilding safety where others had dismantled it. And that blueprint? It had always been in my drawer. I just never thought I'd be the first client. Amelia hadn't spoken to her father since the court hearing. She sat beside me in Diana's sunroom the following morning, sipping coffee from a mug that read, Nevertheless, she persisted. A gift from one of her professors. She held it tightly, like it anchored her. He texted again, she said, eyes on the steam curling from her cup. Twice this morning. I didn't ask what he said. I already knew. Gregory wasn't creative. His apologies came in recycled lines. Lines I had once believed, back when I still thought longevity was proof of loyalty. If you've ever had to explain to your daughter why the person who raised her could still break her heart, subscribe. Some stories aren't about rage, they're about protecting who's watching. He said he didn't mean for it to happen like that, Amelia continued. That it was complicated, that you were cold. My breath caught, just for a moment, not from hurt, but from the sheer predictability of it. Of course he did, I replied softly. He wants to control the story now that he's lost control of the outcome. She finally looked at me. Were you cold, Mom? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I was practical. I always have been. I made sure the bills were paid, the lights stayed on, the taxes were filed. I saved for your college. I showed up. And I stayed. That doesn't sound cold, she murmured. Number. But it wasn't warm enough for a man like him, not when someone younger offered compliments instead of balance, when someone else didn't expect him to grow. We sat in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of weight. Some daughters only begin to understand their mothers when the illusion of their fathers shatters. Tell me if you've been there. Because that silence, it's sacred. You should tell me everything, Amelia said, all of it. Don't protect me anymore. I'm not 15. And so I did. I told her about the texts I'd found, the financial transfers, the separate apartment lease with Cassandra's name, the planned announcement he thought would humiliate me, using her graduation party as the stage. She didn't cry, not right away. She asked questions, listened carefully, took it all in. Then, when I finished, she stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to me, her shoulders tense. "You saved everything, quietly." "I did. You could have told me." "I wanted to, 1,000 times, but I needed you to have your semester, your celebration, your space to be proud." Her voice was tight, and he used that space to burn everything down. He did. She turned then, her eyes wet, her voice shaking. "I used to think he was the stable one." "That's because I never let you see the scaffolding." She walked back, sat beside me, and this time she cried, not the helpless sobs of a little girl, but the tears of a woman grieving the father she thought she had. I wrapped my arms around her. "He still loves you," I said gently, "in his own way." "But he didn't love you?" "Not enough to stay honest." If you've ever had to tell your child the truth about someone you once loved, not to destroy the memory, but to set her free, then you understand what this moment costs. Later that afternoon, we received a message from a mutual friend. Cassandra had left Gregory. According to the voicemail Diana played aloud, Cassandra had packed her things and moved out of the apartment. She told a friend that Gregory's accounts were frozen, that he had lied about his assets, and that she wasn't interested in starting over with a man who couldn't manage his life. I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. "You think he'll try to come back?" Amelia asked that night over dinner. "Maybe," I said honestly. "Men like him don't grieve what they lose. They mourn the loss of their control." She nodded. "He always did hate being questioned." "Exactly. Sometimes revenge doesn't come in the form of shouting matches or broken glass. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the realization that someone who once owned the room now has to knock." We were washing dishes when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Gregory. I didn't open it. "Do you want me to block him?" Amelia asked. "No," I said. "I want a record of every word." She paused, looked at me carefully. "You're not afraid of him?" "No," I replied, "because I've already won." She didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded and dried another plate. That night, as I lay in Diana's guest room, I stared at the ceiling and felt something strange. Not anger, not grief, but peace. I had lived for almost 3 decades walking beside a man who thought silence meant weakness. But now he knew. Silence is a warning, and I had given it long enough. I should have known he would try to reclaim the narrative. Gregory had lost his courtroom ground. Cassandra had left. The applause he'd expected never came. His messages went unanswered. The friends who once called him a good guy in a tough situation were suddenly very quiet. So instead he showed up, with Cassandra, at Diana's house, without calling, without knocking, without any sense of shame. If you've ever had someone betray you and then show up on your doorstep as if they still belonged, subscribe. You are not alone in that silence. We were in the kitchen, Amelia and I making coffee, still in pajamas, when Diana called out from the front hallway. Her voice was tight. "Bianca, you'll want to see this." I turned the corner, and there they were. Gregory in a blazer, as if this was a business meeting. Cassandra in a lavender-wrapped dress, her hair curled in waves like she was going to brunch. Her eyes darted around the foyer like she expected cameras. Or maybe forgiveness. I stepped forward slowly, arms crossed. "What are you doing here?" Gregory cleared his throat. "We need to talk. In person." Cassandra nodded. "We thought it might help." Diana stepped in from behind me. "You brought your girlfriend to my house? Unannounced?" "It's a family matter," Gregory snapped, "and you're making it worse." Amelia walked in behind us barefoot, hair still damp from the shower. Her eyes locked onto Cassandra. "You have some nerve." Gregory held up his hands. "Everyone just calm down." "They always want calm after the damage is done. Tell me if you've seen it. That moment when chaos walks in and tells you to be civilized. "I've been trying to reach you," Gregory said to me, tone shifting. "You've frozen everything. We need to talk about what happens next." "The next step is the full hearing," I replied. "In 3 weeks, you'll speak there." "Bianca, be reasonable." "No." My voice was firm, still. "This isn't a negotiation. You chose your moment. You chose your exit. You don't get to rewrite it now." Gregory turned to Amelia. "Honey, please, talk to your mother." "I am talking to her," Amelia said. "I've been listening to her. And for the first time in my life, I'm seeing who she really is." Gregory's mouth tightened. "She's turning you against me." "No," she said. "You did that yourself, at my graduation." He opened his mouth again, but it was Cassandra who interrupted. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said softly. "Maybe we shouldn't have come." Amelia turned on her. "Why are you even here? What did you think this was going to be? A reunion?" Cassandra's face flushed. "I thought, Gregory said he just wanted to fix things." "You thought you could stand in this house," Diana said coldly, "and ask for understanding?" "No," I said. "She came to witness the result of what she helped create, and now she has." Cassandra looked at Gregory. "You didn't say it would be like this." "Because he never says what things will really be like," I added. "Sometimes the most brutal mirror is being forced to face the people who know the full story. That's what real consequence looks like." Cassandra took a small step backward. "I'm sorry," she said, to no one in particular. I didn't know the money wasn't what he claimed, or the timeline." Gregory turned sharply. "What are you doing?" She blinked. "You told me you were separated for over a year." Diana laughed under her breath. "Men like you never count emotional betrayal, just legal paperwork." Gregory looked cornered, trapped. "We shouldn't be doing this in front of everyone." "And yet here you are," I said, like always, wanting the mess to happen on your terms. He stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "You know this isn't who I really am." I met his eyes. "You're right. You're worse." He flinched. "Finally. Have you ever spoken a single sentence that made someone see themselves fully for the first time? That's not cruelty. That's clarity." "I think you should leave," Diana said from the archway. "Both of you." Gregory's voice cracked. "Amelia, please." But Amelia had already walked away, into the living room, out of his reach. Gregory looked at me one last time, then turned to Cassandra, but she was already walking toward the door. Outside, I watched from the window as they stood in the driveway, Cassandra speaking quickly, gesturing, Gregory defensive, arms crossed, the scene unraveling like fabric finally too worn to hold. Diana joined me at the window. "Well," she said dryly, "that was satisfying." "It wasn't revenge," I said. "It was reality, finally showing up to its own funeral." She nodded. "You handled it with restraint." I sipped my coffee. "That was for Amelia." Not every confrontation needs raised voices. Sometimes the deepest cuts come from calm refusal. Tell me if you've ever had to choose silence over spectacle. That afternoon, Gregory's car left the driveway, alone, and no one ran after him. The text came an hour after Gregory and Cassandra left Diana's house. "Gregory, you've always been calculating. I never realized how far you'd go." I stared at the screen for a long time, not because the words hurt, but because of how predictable they were. Calculating. That was what men like Gregory called women who refused to fall apart on schedule. If you've ever been called cold, heartless, or calculated just because you protected yourself, subscribe. You're not the villain. You're the survivor. I didn't respond. Not then. I saved the message, labeled it, documented it, just like everything else, because I hadn't gone far. I had gone quiet. I had gone inward. I had done what women have done for generations. I prepared while they performed. At that point, the financial picture was already unraveling on his end. His corporate card had been suspended. The condo purchase fell through when the leasing agency flagged inconsistencies in the submitted documents. The brokerage account he used for speculative investments had been placed under review after I submitted the transfer audit. What Gregory never realized was that every time he moved money into shadows, he gave me a flashlight. And I had used it well. Sometimes financial survival looks like spreadsheets and silence. If you've ever done the math while pretending not to notice, tell me, you were never naive. By the end of that week, my attorney had received Gregory's revised proposal. He wanted a clean 50-50 now. He offered to relinquish the Savannah property in exchange for a portion of my retirement. Philip didn't laugh. He just sent it back with a single line: prenup stands. I was sitting in Diana's guest room, laptop open, reviewing tax deductions for 3 new clients. They were all women, all over 40, all recently separated or divorced. One was a paralegal, one a florist. One had never worked outside the home. They didn't want revenge. They wanted clarity, language, tools. So I gave it to them. And in doing so, I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was beginning. There is a difference between rebuilding and rebirth. The first restores what was. The second creates what never existed before. That afternoon, Amelia came into the room holding a letter. "It's from Dad," she said. I took it gently, turning it over. His handwriting was still neat. Always was. Gregory believed in appearances. "I haven't read it," Amelia added. "He asked me to give it to you." I opened it slowly. "Bianca, I don't know what I expected. Maybe that you'd break down. Maybe that you'd need time. Maybe that you'd forgive me eventually, because that's what you always did. But you didn't break. You became someone I don't recognize. You've always been the one who made sense of the chaos. I realize now that I mistook your calm for weakness. That was my mistake. You were the strongest part of this marriage. I don't expect you to believe me, but I'm sorry." I folded the letter, set it on the nightstand. Amelia watched me. "Do you believe him?" "I believe he's sorry the plan failed," I said. "Not that he made it." She didn't argue. She understood now. I went back to my screen. One of my clients had messaged, "He says I'm greedy for asking for half. Am I greedy?" I typed back without hesitation. "Number, you're prepared. There's a difference. And you are allowed to ask for what you built, even if he pretends he built it alone. If you've ever had to teach another woman the difference between guilt and value, tell me. You're doing more than surviving. You're reshaping the world, one invoice at a time." By the end of the week, I had officially filed the business license for Caldwell Financial Transitions, a consultancy for women in transition. My first real piece of paper with only my name on it, not Mrs. Caldwell, not Gregory's wife, just Bianca. That night, Diana poured 2 glasses of wine and raised hers in my direction. "To calculated women," she said with a wink. "To practical survival," I replied. They called me calculating. I called it keeping receipts. And now, those same receipts were buying me freedom. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, the kind of place where lives change quietly without fireworks, just the sound of pages turning, gavels falling, and names being read into record. I sat in the front row beside Philip, my attorney, with my documents neatly organized in a leather folio. Across the aisle, Gregory sat with his lawyer, a new one this time, older, polished, desperate. He avoided my gaze. For the first time, he looked small in a room. That was new. Gregory had always been the one who stood taller than the moment, until the moment finally outgrew him. If you've ever watched someone try to twist a story they wrote themselves, just because you learned to read the fine print, subscribe. You're not alone in that courtroom silence. The judge entered, a woman in her early 60s, director. She didn't bother with preambles. She opened the file, adjusted her glasses, and read the case title into the record. Then she looked up at both sides. "This is a final divorce hearing between Bianca Caldwell and Gregory Caldwell. We are here to review marital asset division, financial disclosure compliance, and the terms of the prenuptial agreement signed on May 14, 1996. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," both attorneys replied. Philip passed her a file. Our documentation, including account transfers, property attempts, and confirmed infidelity under the existing clause. Gregory's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we would like to contest the continued enforceability of the prenuptial agreement, given the duration of the marriage and the changed financial circumstances. The judge didn't flinch. Changed for whom? Gregory shifted in his chair. They always shift when they realize the room doesn't belong to them anymore. Not the conversation, not the story, not even the silence. She flipped to page 7 of the prenup. Section 12. Infidelity clause, still in effect. No expiration language, explicit and binding. Do you dispute the clarity of this clause? His lawyer hesitated. We believe the context, she interrupted, is that Mr. Caldwell moved marital assets into a private account, established a lease on a secondary residence with a third party, and concealed these actions from his spouse. Is that correct, Mr. Caldwell? Gregory opened his mouth. Philip calmly placed a photo onto the evidence stand, the one of Gregory and Cassandra at the resort, their hands linked, a printed timestamp beneath. He looked away. There's a silence that happens when you stop defending yourself and just let the evidence speak. The judge continued. Mrs. Caldwell has provided documented proof of fund movement totaling $184,000 over 14 months, cross-referenced with vacation expenses and undisclosed financial gifts to Ms. Wells. This constitutes a breach under Section 12. Gregory's lawyer shifted tactics. We'd like to propose a revision to the division of investments, perhaps 60-40 instead of the prenup's 70-30, given the emotional nature of the proceedings. Philip didn't even rise. No revision, Your Honor. We ask the court to enforce the signed agreement in full. The judge looked at Gregory. Did you read this agreement before you signed it? He nodded once. Did you ask for this clause? He nodded again. Then you should have remembered it. The law doesn't protect you from your past, especially not when it's in writing, signed in your own hand. She took a breath. I'm enforcing the prenuptial agreement as written. Mrs. Caldwell retains full ownership of the marital home, her retirement accounts, and 70% of shared investments. Mr. Caldwell will retain his personal brokerage account and business holdings, which appear unstable based on recent filings. The Savannah property remains suspended pending full discovery. Gregory visibly paled. Philip whispered to me, That's everything. You got all of it. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I simply nodded. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it's just a woman listening to the judge read the clause her husband forgot he wrote. As we left the courtroom, Gregory followed. I heard his steps behind me on the marble floor. Bianca. I stopped, turned slowly. He looked tired. Older. The last 3 weeks had aged him in a way 28 years of marriage never had. I didn't think it would end like this. You ended it, I said. I just responded. He ran a hand through his hair. I was angry. I felt invisible. You were never invisible, I said. You just weren't worshipped. He blinked. I gave you respect, support, patience. You wanted applause. His mouth opened, but no words came out. You know, I added, I've been called a lot of things lately. Cold, calculated. I've even been called ruthless. But you know what I really am? He shook his head. Prepared. And done. If you've ever had to tell someone the conversation is over, not because you're angry, but because you've already healed, tell me. That's not revenge. That's peace. He didn't follow me after that. It took exactly 1 month to clear the final transfer. The house deed arrived by certified mail. My name, only mine, stood alone at the bottom. No cosigner, no joint trust, no more Mr. and Mrs. Just Bianca Caldwell. I held the envelope in my hands for a while before opening it. It wasn't the value that made me pause. It was the silence. Because there is a kind of quiet that only comes after chaos finally stops echoing. Not relief, not victory, just stillness. If you've ever stood in a room where your pain once lived and felt nothing but peace, subscribe. That's the moment worth remembering. The living room looked different now, not because I changed the furniture, but because I had stopped waiting for it to feel like a shared space. It wasn't. It never had been. I had just filled the silence so long, I forgot I was the only one trying to keep the walls warm. Amelia was moving into her dorm that weekend. She was going early, taking on a summer internship before her first semester even started. She hugged me tight before she left. I feel like we're both starting something at the same time. We are, I whispered into her hair. Only you get to call yours a beginning. She smiled. And you? A rewrite. Not every woman gets to start over with a clean page. Some of us have to write our future in the margins of what someone else tried to erase. The consultancy grew faster than I expected. Word traveled quickly in my town. A retired teacher referred her niece. A nurse going through arbitration found me online. By fall, I was holding small workshops at the community center, teaching women how to read their bank statements, how to protect their names, how to build boundaries in dollars. I didn't need applause. But one evening, a woman stayed behind after a session. Her name was Linda. She was quiet, mid-40s. She told me she'd seen my story on a local business blog. Not the scandal, but the recovery, the firm, the mission. She said, "I'm not there yet, but I believe I could be." I didn't give her a pep talk. I just gave her a folder, labeled Day 1. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer isn't advice, it's proof that there's life after silence and wealth after erasure. Months passed. I barely noticed the calendar changing. I wasn't counting anniversaries anymore. Then, one afternoon in late October, Diana came by with a box. It was from the old storage unit she'd helped me clear. Inside were some old photo albums, a few of Gregory's cufflinks, and one small velvet box. I opened it without expecting anything, and inside was the original engagement ring. Thin, gold, understated. He'd picked it without asking. I'd worn it for 28 years. I held it for a few seconds, then placed it on the fireplace mantel, not as a trophy, not as bitterness, just as memory. It was a symbol, but it had no power now. That's what healing is, when the thing that once broke you becomes something you can place down, walk away from, and not look back. 2 days later, I received a message. Not from Gregory, but from his former company's HR department. They were dissolving his contract. He had listed me as an emergency contact years ago and never updated it. It ended with, "We apologize for any inconvenience." I closed the email and smiled. He thought he could break me. But he didn't realize I had already rebuilt myself while he was still holding the hammer. I hosted Thanksgiving at my house that year. My name on the title, my cooking in the kitchen, my friends around the table. Not just family, friends who felt like family. When Amelia arrived home that afternoon, she hugged me at the door. "Mom, this place feels different." I knew what she meant. It wasn't that the furniture had changed, or the paint color. It was the energy, the peace, the strength. She looked at me as we stood together in the kitchen. "I'm proud of you." I blinked. Not because I needed her approval, but because for so many years, I wasn't even sure she noticed. "I'm proud of you too," I said. "You're everything I hoped you'd be, and more." She looked around the house again. "Do you ever think about him?" I nodded. "But not in the way I used to." She tilted her head. "What way is that?" "Not as the man who hurt me. Just as the one who pushed me toward the life I was meant to have." She smiled slowly. "That's a better story. Some people enter your life to love you. Others enter to reveal how much you were willing to forget just to feel seen." That night, as I turned off the lights and stood by the window, I looked out at my quiet neighborhood and realized he would never understand what I had built, because he had only ever measured power in applause. I measured mine in freedom. This story is not about revenge through fire, it's about power through preparation. Bianca didn't win by screaming. She won by staying calm, staying smart, and staying true to her value. It's a silent triumph. And that silence, it echoes longer than applause. If you saw yourself in this story, hit subscribe to keep hearing kindness echo after heartbreak.